This is the 6th Think Big for the Verify testing team. This is actually a Think Small version of that. And we'll be thinking small, sorry, this is the 7th, my bad. And we'll be thinking small about code quality today. I was reading the wrong line in the agenda. So quick recap from the Think Big, which we'll link to in the video as well. We talked about the persona, VPs, directors who would care about kind of is something risky to deploy, and using code quality as a proxy for risk. We talked about a data view that would help them summarize that risk as it relates to the quality of the code. And we think the ideal outcome is a totally customizable dashboard of sorts that they can use and push things around and together to identify risky things. I intended to, in the agenda, link to some design that Juan just did that actually, for our long-term vision, that would show that really, really well. And I'll add that into the agenda later. Did I miss anything from that super fast recap that we want to touch back on? Great. So then moving into from this really great, awesome idea of here's a great way for you to categorize risk of your project and if you should move forward with the deployment or not, or invest in squashing tech debt there. Let's think small about what can we do that in the next milestone that would be a step in that direction of identifying risk, reducing risk, especially when it comes to our current code quality solution.
Could we historically look at code quality like per deployment, like how it changed? So if we identify a deployment as having, we have to roll back a deployment because it introduces some horrible thing. If there's a simple way to correlate that with code quality, to say, oh, this happened here, we added this complexity and this bug came out of it because we didn't see it here.
So you would do something like take a snapshot of your code quality report and attach it as release evidence almost, or release artifact through the progressive delivery, or I think I have the wrong group name or don't know the right group name, but that group. They're taking the JUnit report for test evidence already for that kind of purpose.
Oh, well, that's even less to do.
Yeah. So it would be, would it be the entire the entire code quality report? I guess what would that artifact look like to, say, a release manager? Let's talk about a release manager persona coming back, and the use case might be, hey, engineering manager, we had to roll back this release. There was a bug. It was identified in this file, which is something you work on. Here's the code quality report. What happens? How do we support that interaction? Is that the right interaction?
The file might be too specific. Overall, I was thinking that if we had the code quality artifact for a release, a release manager could look at the improvements and degradations from the last release to say, like, did we simplify a lot of things? Did we, make things a lot more complex? Which direction was this release moving in when this bad thing happened?
Gotcha. So instead of a full report, it's more like the summary report that is on the MR page?
Yeah, it's a similar idea.
Okay.
MRs might be kind of a granular level to do that at, and releases might be too high level, but I don't know, that correlation is what I was thinking of.
Yeah. So I could see, like, if you're using feature branches or even release branches and you went to do that merge, it would generate that artifact at that time. And you could look at that summary report and say, hey, between what is our current stable branch and what we're trying to merge in. Here's the degradations, here are the improvements in code quality.
Yeah.
So outside of, like, if you did that as an MR, you're going to get that. Is there another, what is the use case I'm not understanding or grokking that would expose that data?
Sorry, what?
It sounds like that's done.
Well, so that I was just thinking about that because that happens on individual merge requests for us.
Mhm.
And I don't know if we use that or look at that. And just the volume of merge requests we have might make that difficult.
Mhm.
Like I don't know that a bug is going to be traced back to a single code quality diff in a merge request somewhere.
Yeah.
Between releases, like, you know, day to day, if we can say, oh, on, you know, today when we released, as opposed to yesterday when we released the version before, you know, we saw this effect here.
All right, so let's talk about it then, like in the context of what happens at GitLab with I think it's nightly when that release branch is cut.
6 hours.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Ricky? I missed that.
I think it's every 6 hours now.
Oh, wow. Okay. So every 6 hours, is there a comparison that would happen? What would be compared? How can we slice that down?
I think that it might be more useful as almost like an after the fact thing, especially when you're talking about continuous delivery at GitLab. Like if something did go wrong, it could be one piece of evidence among many where we could look for trends or like where did we go wrong? Like how did the process fail us? What should we have done in order to avoid this? Blah, blah, blah. Like kind of more like a retrospective or RCA type tool that you could dig into to look for data to support your hypothesis when you're asking the 5 whys or whatever, something like that.
I think part of it too is we're trying to figure out risk to do a release as opposed to just doing follow-up after a release has gone bad, right? So what I wonder is where does that fit in? Because if we go to like releases, I think that's more of this is what has happened in the release. It's already done. It's not what's leading up to this next release.
Yeah, I wonder if it's almost like if the company had embraced a continuous delivery process or continuous deployment process, that they would use the report differently. So if they hadn't done that and they were still doing manual deployments, they would probably use it as like okay, how concerned should I be when I click this button as a release manager? But if they're already continuously releasing, it's more of oh, this blew up. Let's try and figure out why. I wonder
that makes sense.
Like something cool could be maybe it stops an auto deployment if there's too much risk associated with the deployment and that forces somebody to intervene. That might be neat, but this is supposed to be think small, not think big. So I'll hold on to that one.
So let's take that and use that as the think big though. And what is the smallest version of that we could test in the next milestone?
Putting the severity and ordering by the severity in the MR widget. There's already an issue for that open.
Mm-hmm. So this happens even before the merge, before the deploy, because you can't deploy something that didn't merge, right?
Yeah, and it's the smallest thing we can do, I think, we would need to take severity into account anyway, which I don't think we're doing right now. It's a code quality widget. We're kind of just smushing everything into the comparison. So if we brought severity in, that would be like the first step towards actually using it to calculate risk. I think I'm probably wrong.
Scott, Max, Eric, Zeph, Juan, Parker. Any other thoughts from the collection on mute?
And so you have to excuse my ignorance a little bit here, right? I'm not as close to the code as y'all. So taking severity into account, would that be something like a red, yellow, green, kind of low, medium, high severity kind of display? Like how would that be surfaced to them? Because I think there's value in that, right? If you see red, you know, maybe someone goes, oh, right, you know, sound the alarm. That's something that's super severe I need to take care of.
The scale, I think, is a 5-point scale from Code Climate. I think
Okay.
it goes like critical down to high, medium, low, something. I don't remember.
Okay.
I think we could probably co-opt what the security team has already done with their security reports. That design already exists. I don't think we would need a new one. We would just copy what their widget does.
Cool.
So stepping outside of things already in the backlog, is there an even smaller version of that that we can implement that gives, so if we take the use case of a developer who saw new problem in code in my MR related to code quality, how do I know if I should fix this or just let it go?
The only other thing is to actually make the comparison compare the right things, but we're already working on that too.
Let me reemphasize the outside of the backlog part of this.
You know, I guess even smaller than going to the severity, it could be as simple as needs attention, right? An alert that needs attention, but I don't know that that would motivate someone to, or give them enough information to efficiently go and address the issue.
Yeah.
We already linked to the violation in the code, in the source, right?
It's clickable from the code quality report on the pipeline page. I don't remember if it is in the MR widget or not.
It might make it easier to say, like, you know, oh, what is this violation? Should I fix it now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
if we're
a little
talking
bit
about,
more. Sorry, go ahead.
if we're talking about not, if based on the hypothesis that low quality code as identified by the scanner would create an issue, what if we just block the deploy? Or block the merge rather, not the deploy. And kind of force people into fixing new new degradations.
I think we'd want to do it optionally. Like they'd have to opt in to blocking the deploy in a setting or something. I'm not sure how that's done right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, what if, you know, because someone could be working in a different time zone, or it could be one code owner, right? And then if it gets blocked, that may be a bigger blocker than just blocking that that merge.
Are we taking that as a given, or are we trying to validate, like, these code quality violations do represent risk?
Do we need to, is there a simple version of, hey, you as an organization have spent some time in the code, you understand based on the severity levels what you need to care about.
Right.
We start to surface only some of those.
If we buried everything except critical in the merge request widget, do you think it would increase the signal versus noise of the widget?
if we buried everything, where else would they see the
I mean,
non-critical issues?
you could click into it, you know, and if you looked at the full pipeline page, you could still see it. But I'm thinking about how, you know, we have a lot of widgets that are like 800 improvements and 900 degradations, and it's, you know, 3-line change or whatever.
But that's partially or mostly because we're not comparing the right commits, right?
Yeah, no, that problem, that is a big source of the problem. But I was thinking about how when there's too much there, developers and release managers sort of automatically check out, and they're like, that's not. It's just that there's too much noise is, I think, a hurdle for people.
I don't think that there would be too much noise in the opposite case. If you think about like DangerBot and how reliable DangerBot is when it comes up with like a Rubocop violation or something, or like it puts stuff in the DangerCop comment. Like, I feel like everybody pays a lot of attention to that because it isn't noisy. It's just as noisy as the amount of changes that you made is. And so if we could, if we had a proportional level of noise because the widget was comparing the right things, then I think it would probably be fine.
I think a defect of the design that basically became more defective as GitLab has been growing is that the widgets are very, I think people are becoming blind to the widgets a little bit. You know, like you see them and you probably pay attention a lot to the pipeline one, but the other ones are like, yeah, they are there. You know, like I think that's what Drew is saying, right? Like it's part of the background noise. Where, you know, the difference with the danger bot is that's actually active noise that is like disrupting like the thread, and it's putting like a comment there that says like, hey, look at this, you know, like something fell, you know. So, I don't know.
It fails your pipeline, which is a very clear signal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's one thing too, you know. The code quality doesn't fail your pipeline, right? That's unless by design it's not like that. But I guess you could set it up that it fails your pipeline, but that doesn't make sense. But yeah, what I'm saying is that we gotta think about these things as how, like, if they really deserve more attention, then we gotta design around the constraints that we have right now, which are people are likely going to ignore those things if we don't do something meaningful to show them the issues.
So what is, as we think about the widget then, if the widget is not helpful in understanding the issue, or if even understanding there's risk, is there a minimal change we can make to that presentation to just better understand I've introduced risk to the code base, or I've taken away risk from the code base even?
I think that goes back to what we were talking about before as including severity. Like as soon as we do that and we kind of implement the same design that the SAST and DAST reports have, after we fix which two reports we're comparing, then that would be very meaningful, because you could see what happened as far as like instant feedback when Secure implemented that change. Like they didn't change the amount of violations that their widget was reporting. They just made it red. And when they did that, they got a ton of feedback from a lot of different people around the organization and from customers about that change. But like all they did was make it red. Like they didn't block the pipeline. They didn't do anything else. They just made it red. So if we make it red, but we also fix the report comparisons, then we won't get all the blowback, but we'll get all the eyes on it. We'll get all the attention.
All right, so let's take another step down we've already implemented this path. It feels like we've already, like 6 months ago or less, identified what the problems are in making the code quality comparison useful, the right commits, and exposing severity. So once we make that change and have the slightly modified UI, what's the hardest part about getting people to understand it's no longer noise?
I think that's part of what the UI change accomplishes, isn't it? I mean, if it's working with the SAST and DAST, then we might see the same thing with code quality. That might be the smallest change to make it actionable information as opposed to noise.
Is just that subtle UI change going to be enough for a developer to realize, oh, hey, I need to actually pay attention to this today versus yesterday when I just skimmed over all of those widgets?
I feel that is that shipped, that like is that live? I don't see it. The security affordances, that like the severity affordances that Ricky was mentioning.
I can look back. They might have rolled it back because they did get a lot of pushback from people because the report comparisons were wrong. So it'd be like Drew was saying, there'd be a one-line change that would say 16 new critical security violations, and so people were understandably a little bit.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, if that like really drove a lot of attention into it, I will say that seems like a reasonable. I mean, the expectation that I will have is that if we do the same, we get attention into it as well. So, but I think overall, there's there's other things that we gotta do at the merge request page level. The interesting thing here is that we own most of those widgets, right? I think like it's like 70% us on fixing the visibility of that block and making it like more readable. And I don't have ideas. I mean, I could explore ideas, but I think I want to hear what people think about that. One thing that I'm going to mention is, for instance, if you look at the pipeline, the coverage there is very clear, right? You see like what's the total amount of coverage that you have and if you're increasing it or decreasing it. And I wonder if we could do something along those lines for quality inside the pipeline, the merge request pipeline view, or like widget.
So that's a single score, and we don't have that with code quality. Is there a simpler view?
Yeah, but we could, I mean, we could very much say code quality. I mean, the things that we're saying about code quality on the widget, we could say those things on the actual code quality. We could be saying those things on the merge request pipeline widget, right? So we could say like code quality improve on 75 criteria and degraded in 89 criteria, and then maybe we can compute the number on how like that's positive or negative. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying that that's the solution. I'm just kind of like suggesting that like why is it that coverage, at least in my particular very biased case, works better in visibility than code quality right now. You know, I don't know. It's just kind of like I'm just formulating that question more in a rhetoric way, more not suggesting that that's the solution, but I'm trying to understand why that's the case.
I think it's easier to understand a percentage, and if it goes up or down, then 20 things got better, 12 things got worse, and also all of the severity of them are different.
It's because Code Climate uses a letter grade. Like they roll all your stuff up into your GPA and give you an A-, and you're like, all right, well that's that.
For that vision, 3-year vision issue that James and I have like created and that I'm working on it, some of those designs I'm actually suggesting that, you know, I think that we should be more opinionated and say like, this is an A, this is a B, this is a C, this is a D, or this is an F, you know, and like perhaps we could create ways for people to adjust the sensitivity of those scores. So if they feel that they are working in a project that which doesn't have like very straight constraints, then they kind of like let that loose a little bit, and then like the score could be a little bit more generous. But I definitely think that those letters help a lot to create a context around your code base quality.
Yeah, I
All right,
think
I'm gonna
that. Sorry, I
I'm
was
gonna
just
jump
gonna.
us forward a little bit and say,
Okay.
all right, let's just build a score, and let's make a super simple version of it. What's the riskiest part of introducing that? Or what's the hardest part of creating that simple version in our last couple of minutes?
I think it would be that everybody would have a different interpretation of what that would mean. And so if you were to introduce an opinionated score like that, I think you'd have to have it be either dismissible or extremely configurable.
But what I'm saying is that most people, like, they are not gonna make sense of their improved or degraded quality if there's no context around if it, like, how bad or good is that, you know what I'm saying? It's like almost like if you tell me that like my code quality improved on 75 areas against what, you know, like that doesn't tell me anything right now. Like it will be better if it tells me like, you know, your overall code quality is a C, and you just made it like several points better, and like you're closer to a B, you know. I think it's more about the idea of gradually improving that grade. You know, it's like trying to score more and more and more when you're like in school and you want to get better at something. Um, the grade is just like a very it's very subjective, but it's a better reference than just like mentioning that things are improving or degrading. So I agree with you. It needs to be very configurable or very well defined. But I think the value for the customer is that they have a reference. You know, they stop looking at something that it's vague and in a vacuum and doesn't mean anything to them right now.
I posted a link in chat of just what Code Climate themselves provide on their free version. If anybody wants to look at that, it's several different criteria. It's maintainability, they talk about code smells, duplication, those different kinds of things. So I don't know, was there one thing in particular we're thinking of trying to pull out of Code Climate? Because we can get...
I think it would be a non-code climate item. So we just talk about what's the quality as we've measured. Right now we have Code Climate as the underlying engine, but there's no reason that we couldn't have two engines running and scan the code twice and give you a better score, or start to incorporate other signals as well into your code coverage. Like, I mean, JJ had some great ideas around that, around like churn plus unit coverage, or test coverage rather. And then starting to think about, hey, your churn plus your test coverage plus how many of those tests are failing all the time? Well, you got low quality code in there collectively because you're not actually testing it. So we don't know if it's good or not. So some ideas there. And maybe there's a simple version of that that just starts with the Code Climate engine. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and there's no reason that we can show like let's say Code Climate and SonarQube next to each other and say like, oh, Code Climate gave you an A and SonarQube gave you a B. You know, it's
yeah, kind of like you get like with your credit score if you're in the States, where you can see like, here's your experience score and here's your whatever the other company is score, and see how those two things change. And you might think that, you know, different parts should mean different things, but that isn't the case. Maybe we should take an opinionated approach the first time and say, listen, this is what it means to have high quality code. And if you don't like it, well, just turn this feature off.
Going for the controversial, huh?
We've heard from plenty of folks that they want opinionated tools. And if they don't, they'll pick a different tool. And they want to see a score and see how it moves. It's more important to understand what goes into it. And then they can like weight themselves. Well, how much do we actually need to pay attention to that?
So make our baseline opinion as what we expose, and then if they want to tweak it, they can.
Yeah, I mean the core concept of GitLab is make it easier to do DevOps and to have a tool chain. If we make it easy with one tool, but then give you a million things to configure, did we really make it any easier for you?
Yeah, when it's configurable, I still think there's got to be some kind of like hypothesis that once like most people don't configure the thing.
Yeah.
Like the default configuration is going to be what's rolled with by most people because they're like, yeah, it looks great, good enough. And so even if it is configurable, like we should be opinionated about what the default is. I think I agree with that.
Cool.
Oh, by the way, the configuration doesn't need to be like a crazy, like we can start with a very basic slider, right? That it says like very strict, not so strict, very, like that type of stuff, like that you move around and you can, because not every project has the same amount of like constraints, like maybe you're working on something super secret, maybe you're working on like software for like an airplane, I think things there need to be very tight, you want like the highest amount of strictness and everything needs to be perfect, but if you're working on a website for I don't know, teenagers sharing something like whatever they share nowadays, then I'm not saying that you shouldn't write good code for that. I'm just saying like maybe you don't need so much strictness,
Yeah, you have the whole
Isn't as
regulated software industry, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we didn't quite get down to a single issue to write up, but I think we did pretty well validate that we already have most of those issues written in the realm of code quality in the near term anyway. So as we think about our next Think Big, and we'll talk about this in our group discussion later this week, let's think about some categories outside of what we're working on currently and see if we can't have a different kind of brainstorming discussion in a couple of weeks when we do our next Think Big. So open issues, upvote issues that are there, I will link to that in the video. Thank you everyone for your time. This was a fruitful discussion though, in validating that we are on the right track and in thinking about some of the small iterations that maybe we make even to those current issues of getting a cleaner view, more signal, less noise in the MR widget. All right, cheers everyone.
All right. Cheers.
Thanks.